For the first time since 1981, the Road Accident Fund says it's reached a historic 3.2 billion rand surplus following decades of revenue losses and financial deficits. In fact, over the past several years, the state entity has found itself in a situation where it was more in debt than it was able to actually settle road accident claims. Recently, Transport Minister Balula and the fund looked at the progress of interventions that have been made to recover the entity's effectiveness. For more on this, let's bring in the RAF's CEO, that's Letsoalo, who joins us now via our telephone line. Collins, great to chat to you again. Thanks for making time for the AM report. So in making this announcement in part yesterday, the Transport Minister said that the liability was slashed because of what he called accounting treatment. What does that mean?
Good morning and good morning to the listeners. The accounting treatment simply means that you need to apply a relevant accounting standard to what you do in representing your financial statements. What used to happen is that RAF used what is called IFRS 4, which is accounting for insurance contracts. Last year, there was a new standard that was issued by IPSAS, which is International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board, which is IPSAS 42, that accounts for what is called social benefits. RAF has changed its accounting policy to that to give effect and is the relevant accounting standard that was supposed to be used by RAF. That has now reduced the calculation of the liability and reviewed down to by about 305 billion to about 28 billion in this financial year that has just passed.
Yeah, and it's actually a huge difference. Does that mean that, and I can appreciate that it can get quite complex, but does that mean that the RAF wasn't following the correct accounting principles before this intervention?
Yes, that was the only accounting standard that was there. It was changed in 2015 to include certain things that were supposed not to be included. For instance, the RAF does not have any insurance contracts. So consequently, you wouldn't have an insurance contract. But that was the best way in which they can represent, because the standard for social benefits was not yet released by the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Board.
Okay. Again, many people might be struggling to actually appreciate what it means for them. So let's ask perhaps a more practical question. How do you actually calculate this surplus? Is it A, money in minus the claims that have been paid out, or B, money in minus the claims that have been processed and paid out? In other words, could there still be payments that need to be processed and paid that would eat into the surplus?
Let's not confuse two things. One, the issue of the accounting treatment is really for us neither here nor there, because it's just the way in which you calculate when you recognize that liability in your books. That has nothing to do with the surplus. The surplus is simply your revenue minus your expenditure over the period. How we achieved that was that we have reduced our, what we call our administrative costs downwards. So we were paying out 26 billion and 17 billion was being paid in administrative costs. So we have reduced those administrative costs by about 7 billion this year, which resulted in a surplus of 3.2 billion. So those are totally two different things. That other one deals with issues around how you assess your liability, and that does not deal with statement of financial performance. Our statement of financial performance would be the revenue minus expenditure, and we have reduced the expenditure while revenue continue to be relatively the same. So you would see that our expenses have now reduced. Consequently, we then registered a surplus.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that you're paying out any less money to claimants themselves. Let's speak a bit more about those administrative costs. Typically, what are you categorizing under that? My understanding is that the figure is at 17 billion rand.
Yes. Out of the 17 billion, we collect 43 billion. So we then pay out 26 billion to the claimant, and 17 billion has been in administrative costs. Simply put, this is medical costs or medical service providers that would assist us in assessing the claim. This will be 10.6 billion of this is lawyers, which is legal fees. And this is where we have made much stride, because we got rid of our legal panel that was costing us about 3.6 billion a year, and we've been reducing the money that we pay to plaintiff attorneys. That has resulted in about 7 billion savings. And in any other issues around the efficiencies within the road accident fund that we have tried to squeeze, we have managed to do that, and that has resulted in that surplus.
How much are you paying for legal fees now?
We have reduced the cost of legal fees by about 4 billion so far, out of the 10.6, so we have paid about 6 billion. This is what we are dealing with in the minimum requirement standards that we have brought out, that we want to make sure that we settle those claims before we even incur legal costs.
Yeah, so 6 billion going to legal costs. You mentioned medical costs as well, which I imagine is, let's say, around 2 billion rand from the figures at my disposal. All of that still doesn't come to 17 million. In fact, a 6 billion and a 2 billion is only just 8
Remember,
billion.
the saving is about 7 billion. So you save about 4 billion from legal costs. We saved about 1 billion from medical costs. And we saved about another, I think, billion from any other costs that are associated with actually dispensing the claims.
That's what I'm trying to understand better, that any other costs that you mentioned, because it appears from the numbers you're speaking of now, that's still the lion's share of the 17 billion rand that goes to administrative costs.
As I'm saying to you, we have got 17 billion in administrative costs.
Correct.
We have saved this year 7 billion, right? So if you take 7, so we still sit with the claims cost of about 26 billion that we have had over the years. Now you are left with 17 billion. Out of the 17 billion, as I say, our legal cost is currently about 6 billion, right? So I hope that you understand that. So the difference between the 17 and this year we spend in administrative costs 10 billion instead of 17 billion.
Right.
Yes.
Right, okay. So the 17 billion is not the amount of money that you've actually spent on administrative costs. It's what you would have spent had it not been for the accounting treatment in some respects.
No, had it not been for the reduction in legal costs and medical costs and other costs associated, like your salaries and all the other costs that are coming into the space for being deducted in your expenses.
Okay. The real figure, of course, the real fear, beg your pardon, is that the surplus that is being muchly celebrated from yesterday could very well be gobbled up by the amount of claims that still need to be settled and paid out.
No, but I mean, the issue is where you are now conflating two issues. Okay, you are conflating the cash in your hand, which is registered in the statement of financial position. In that regard, we have increased the amount from 1.2 billion a year in the previous year to 4.6 billion this year. So that is different. That is cash in the account. Now we are talking about statement of financial position, meaning your revenue versus your expenses. So in looking at turning around an entity, there are two things you look at. You look at whether you can increase your revenue or whether you can decrease your expenses to affect the bottom line.
Got you.
So the bottom line is your income less your expenses. In this case, what we did, we knew that our income is fairly stagnant from the fuel levy, and then we have reduced the expenses. As I say, we focused on administrative expenses and we lowered that. That is what has resulted in a surplus that we are talking about. Totally different from the cash in the bank account.
So the surplus and what the minister had to say yesterday is not the full picture. Only one aspect of the RAF is looking rosy, if I'm understanding you correctly.
No, there are two aspects. The first aspect is financial performance, which is the surplus, which looks rosy. You are now going to go to the assets, and our assets have grown over the period. They have grown from about 10 billion to about 15 billion, which is a 4 billion increase in assets, but also from the accounting treatment. You then have got a 305 billion reduction in liability. And our liability position is now at a net of about 30 billion. So both those sides, whether it's financial position or financial performance, RAF has done well in that respect.
And on the claimants and paying out the claimants aspect of matters, I mean, that's actually what's been the bone of contention for many ordinary South Africans. The sense that claims are being made. A lot of them are being stalled for a whole host of reasons, including things like corruption. How well are we doing on that score?
Well, we are doing well in the sense that we have managed to reduce the cost. We have managed to make sure that people that need to be paid get paid. You know of our battle with the lawyers where we are saying that there's been double payments that have been made, and we have been collecting all that money. On the corruption front as well, we are cleaning our claims book in a sense that we are now requesting for more documentation to actually make merit, to determine merit on these issues and determine a better quantum than in the past. So those things are coming to the fore. At Friday, we also gazetted a new RAF 1 form that needs more information on both the issues around medical and the other things that need to be attached for it for us to be able to settle those claims within 120 days. So we are doing quite well on that front. Of course, I mean, there are teething problems that we have, but the model is working.
Of the companies that were double paid, as a proportion, how much of that money have you gotten back?
We had 102 that was outstanding. We are left with less than 20 that are sitting there now and owing us. So it's something that we are going to have to focus on. And if we have got to do the same that they've been doing to us, like attaching their assets, that's what we are going to do to collect money that is due to us.
All right, Collins Letsoalo, thanks very much indeed for helping us try to understand these figures a bit better. He is the CEO of the Road Accident Fund. As much as it can get quite complex, the takeaway there in many respects is that the surplus that was announced to much jubilation, dare I add, yesterday, is not actually the full picture about where the RAF desirably should be. It just, mentions how money in the form of cash is passing hands, if you like. But, issues around claimants and the possible debt from that are still exactly that, quite a bit of an issue. In fact, about 20 billion rand or so still outstanding insofar as that is concerned. So just have that at the back of your mind, I guess, as we continue getting these figures from the Transport Minister.